Resilient by Valerie Bell. Read by Rose Malik. Chapter 4. Radical Love Could Have Saved Nicholas Cruz. The Parkland Shooter. It was February 17th, 2018, 3 days after America experienced the most tragic school shooting in our history. Parkland, Florida had just lost 17 of their children. And now, 2 days later, I found myself being interviewed by a Christian radio program broadcasting in South Florida, including Parkland, where the shootings had just taken place. I don't remember what the radio host asked me. I just remember feeling brokenhearted and compelled to speak of something beyond the ceaseless, as yet unresolvable debate on gun control or the probable causes for someone to behave so ruthlessly that are the usual and typical media covering of school shootings. I found myself reaching into my heart to search for some word of hope, some insight that would comfort, something that could shed light and possibly stop the carnage. Where were the words that God lived in? The acknowledged perspective that would shed His light on our national tragedy? Without premeditation, I suddenly found myself saying, "Radical love could have saved Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooter." Even as I said it, I realized it might sound like a simple overstatement to many people, including some Christ followers. Could radical love have broken through to a disturbed 19-year-old who was gun obsessed and angry enough to kill 17 kids his age and wound 17 others? Could radical love have performed an early intervention and walked through his life challenges with him so he was not alone? Could radical love have changed the trajectory of this tragic story and life? In the days that followed, other radio outlets and print media picked up my remarks. Radical love could have saved Nicholas Cruz was their lead-in. When I heard that phrase with my name attached, I repeatedly asked myself, do I really believe that? Each time, my conviction grew stronger and my heart echoed back, yes, I believe it. Radical love could have saved the Parkland shooter from targeting his pain and suffering into the world until 17 innocent classmates lay dead at his feet. The national debate on gun control is a stuck needle and impotent. Looking to our government for hope or solutions that will protect our children is already too little too late. Mental health experts weigh in, but in the end, nothing much seems to be reversing the cycle of violence. Debate falls short. But even as the news of radicalized by hatred students rampaging through their campuses seems to be a nightmare we can't wake up from, we cannot give up hope. The hope for our culture is found in the way of Jesus, the living out of the redemptive work of the gospel. But, and this is a huge but, we must remember how to love radically. Well, what does radical love look like in our churches today? The radio interviewer asked me. It starts with kids, really. When we love a community's children, we will have more influence and more church growth than we can handle. We may also heal a child who is on their way to pumping the world with their pain from the trigger of an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. Radical love is salvation, redemption, repurpose, redirection, accomplishment, and championing. It is the beauty of the gospel alive through the church. Radical love opens doors. Radical love is the kind that opens a church's door to every child within its reach. That means the kid with behavior problems, children from dysfunctional and hard to work with homes, the children of poverty, children who are already social outcasts, children with special needs, children of different nationalities and tongues, the others, the different, the quirky, the odd, the left out, the overlooked, the abused, the neglected, the hungry, the lonely, the bullied, the ones already sliding into despair, the exploited, the trafficked, the immigrant. When Jesus said, "Let the children come," I'm pretty sure he wasn't thinking about only church kids whose lives are supported by believing, loving homes. His words were also meant to carry those other kids through our church doors and into our hearts. Our legitimate concerns with retention studies that indicate we are losing our own kids has focused on only one part of the child world, our kids. But what about the others? When a church throws open its doors and lets the children come, it changes everything. I'm touched by the kind of love these Let the Children Come churches give to kids. Radical love looks a lot like Oakwood Baptist Church in New Braunfels, Texas. This church started our midweek Bible study club only recently. Not long after, I ran into their senior pastor, Ray Still, and their executive pastor, Rusty Rice. These two pastors were eager to tell me what their first year partnering with Awana had been like. We thought we might have 100 kids come, but instead, a couple hundred more are showing up. This abundance of children forced them to make some choices: go normal or go radical. Should they cut off the number of kids who were allowed to come? Should they restrict it to their own church kids? Sadly, that is often a difficult decision churches are forced to make. But no, they didn't go normal. They didn't go easy. They went radical. It meant finding twice the number of adults to help out. Everyone on paid staff, from pastors and down through the ranks, had to show up to register kids, lead small groups, organize game time, listen to verses, and lead the large group times. But these men were smiling as they told me about their situation. They were excited to share the news of their abundance of children with me. Yes, we all showed up. It was crazy, but it was also exciting. So we decided, why not? Let's go all out and feed them all pizza on Awana night. Formula for radical, crazy kid love right there, I thought to myself. But there was more. Pastor Ray wanted to talk about a special kid in his small group of 9 grade school boys. I have this one kid in my group who is a nightmare, he said, still smiling. He is a full-time job for me almost every week. Recently, I met his mother. I said, I would like to talk to you about your son. I saw her face drop as she prepared herself for the familiar to her bad news. He continued. I told her, we love having your boy at our church. He is always welcome here, and we are doing just great. Ray paused to let his emotions pass. I saw her face light up. She had steeled herself for the usual bad report. I could see how surprised she was that finally there was a word of encouragement coming from somewhere in the world about her child. A couple of hours a week in the presence of caring adults who show God's radical love in their community to each and every child can change everything. Even chance encounters can carry the power to change lives. Here's to the radical love of a pastor who gets out of the pulpit once a week to sit at a kid sized table to love and disciple kids from his community. I know this may sound radical to our KidMin community, but Wes Stafford, President Emeritus of Compassion International and a current Awana board member, explained it this way. Sometimes the most important thing that could fill in the blanks of a child's handbook is not that they have successfully memorized scripture that week, but something that says, you are a great kid. God loves you, and we are so glad you're here. That's what radical love looks like. It's not something you get from having the right curriculum or program. It's a heart for God that puts kids first. We are loved into loving Jesus. Who knows what each of us is capable of without the redeeming work of God in our lives? We are saved from our sin, and we are saved from what we might have become. Of all people, we know the power of God unto salvation, the reality of changed and freed lives, and the impact of radical love. But there was a church. When the leadership team at Awana was forming at that time, we decided to share our childhood stories with each other. One by one, the childhood pain unfolded as we trusted each other with our most vulnerable selves. We were a broken early group. One remembered the night his father rampaged through their home, packing to leave his family forever, all while his older brother shielded him with his body, reading a book out loud to distract him from the adult, potentially violent scene that was unfolding. Another shared how he was beaten by his mother every morning before school for wetting his bed as a child. She waited until everyone else had left for the morning. Then, when they were home alone together, she would beat him. Every morning. No one knew the shameful secret of his mother's behavior that he bore in his childhood body. A writer shared what he had written for his father's funeral, a man who was a Vietnam veteran and an angry, abusive father. I wondered as we listened, how do you sum up the life of a man who broke you as a child? Do you still call him father? One after another, the painful truths were told. We shared our brokenness. We took off our masks that made us appear beautiful and untouched and showed each other our scars. We shared what was done to us behind closed doors. We grieved that those who should have loved us rejected us, and left us with the imprint of adult sin on our lives. We grieved for each other, but we shared more than our brokenness. Interestingly, a pattern of another kind was emerging from our stories. We all shared something else in common. All of our stories ended with the phrase, "But there was a church." I was my mother's whipping boy, but there was a church who loved me. No one knew how dysfunctional we were and how abused and humiliated I was at home, but there was a church where people fathered and mothered me. My dad abandoned my mother and me. He just walked out of our lives. But there was a church that took my mom and me to its heart. We all had knowing pasts, but we had more. In all of our lives, there was a church that made all the difference. And in that sacred place, we had found radical love. We belonged. That's why we believe without reservation that faithful churches can love in a way that can make all the difference for the Nicholas Cruzes and all the us too children, like we were, of this world. We never know how desperate a child's need might be, or what they might be experiencing at adult hands, or why that child has come into our lives or into our church at this time. But we can be sure of this. If they are there, God is doing a work in their lives, and we are part of their story. Maybe they will lead an international discipleship ministry to children when they grow up. Maybe God will use their knowing pasts. When I'm working on the West Coast, I occasionally attend Cavalry Church in Westlake Village, California, where my friend Sean Thornton pastors. This is a beautiful and affluent church set in the coastal hills. One Sunday, I made a surprise visit and thought afterwards that I would stand in line to say hi and greet Sean. I had a long but interesting wait. How can I say this? The people who reached Sean ahead of me were children with disabilities, adults in wheelchairs, and others who struggled to speak clearly or express their thoughts. I smiled as I realized that as successful a pastor as Sean is, these are his special people. The pieces of who Sean is came together for me that morning. I had read his book about his childhood called All But Normal. He described life at home with a mother who was suffering from TBI, traumatic brain injury, and the trauma of living with a mother who was often in fits of rage and dangerous. She also taught Sunday school and was an Awana leader. One night was particularly etched in his memory. It had been a night of hell like no other in our house. "I'm tired of this. I'm not living like this anymore. I'm going to divorce you," Mom shrieked. "Go ahead," Dad yelled back. "What do I care?" Most of these battles died out after a little while, but 30 minutes later, this one was still going strong. From across the room, Mom grabbed something and threw it at Dad, hitting the cabinets near his head. In anger, Dad whirled around and threw something back at her, not full force, but enough to warn her not to do it again. "Boys, go to your rooms," Dad said. Troy and I didn't hesitate. We wanted out of there as much as they wanted us gone. The raging went on for hours, walls pummeled with unseen objects, accusations of the most penetrating kind wielded like daggers. I heard the front door open, and out my window I saw something that wrenched my heart apart. My mother, her body so stiff she could barely walk, breath coming in angry huffs. It was the night my mother was taken to the mental ward. But no one at church realized the trouble they were in at home. Still, the church was a safe place. And today, Sean is a pastor with a knowing past. And it's why every Sunday, Sean stands and receives the stories and comments from anyone who needs a piece of his time. It's why he does it week after week. It's how God uses his knowing past. He explains it like this. Before taking the pulpits on Sunday, I often found myself imagining who was sitting in the congregation that day and what they were struggling with. I visualized wealthy people who had family members held captive by alcohol or drugs. I pictured poor people who have just heard they had cancer and had no way of paying for treatment. I thought of grandparents whose grandkids didn't visit anymore, men who had lost their jobs, kids who were lonely. Hundreds of scenarios played through my head, and I felt the pain of each of them. I realized our family possessed something in our little house on Victory Road that many people simply didn't have: the love and the purpose of God in the midst of seeming chaos. No matter how bad or broken life seemed, God met us with hope. The insight this gave me into people's lives was almost a sixth sense. Somehow, in the context of craziness and pain, God had given me a pastor's heart. A sixth sense. That's radical love born of a knowing past. We may never know a child's whole story, but this we know. We are the church, His body, His light in an increasingly dark world. We have not only the advantages of a knowing past, but we have a way to love with a radical love that belongs to Christ followers alone. It starts with children, even if we are tempted to believe it starts with Washington, D.C. Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, asks some hard questions when it comes to the kind of love the church is offering kids today. Beyond the question of birth rates, what are we not doing with the kids we have? I think the answer to that is direct and straightforward. We have surrendered Sunday school and youth ministry in many of our churches. I am the product of being involved in my local church many hours a week as a boy and teenager. My frame of reality was largely set by my parents' design, and it was church whenever church offered an opportunity, and there were many opportunities. Sunday school, youth choir, Royal Ambassadors for boys, ACT Teens for girls. There were weekly youth fellowships and youth meetings and regular retreats. There were wonderful and faithful adult volunteers, as well as a faithful youth minister. Christian Smith and his research associates found that one of the distinguishing marks of young people who continue their church participation as adults was that they had developed a warm and trusting relationship with an adult in church, even just one, other than their own parents. Radical love was once normative for the church, but today radical love is too often the exception. Radical love goes beyond what's expected in a whole life defining way of relating to a generation of kids. It's so much more than volunteering. Radical love might move you beyond volunteerism and cause you to become a child champion. You speak up for the value of children in your church. You raise the bar for importance of volunteering that is faithful, dependable, and passionate for kids. Radical love might move you beyond child championing to becoming a generational guardian, someone who is there for kids through their childhoods, their young adulthoods, and at every step of their journey. You walk the walk throughout your lifetimes together. Radical love might even make you the kid friendliest church in town. You might end up with everyone's kids. You are kid challenged and kid challenging. You are the ones who can make the greatest investment and difference. Yes, you. In our organization, when we ask churches in their exit polls, "Why are you leaving?" more than anything else they say, "Not enough volunteers. We are moving everything to 1 hour on Sunday. We need something that is easier." Sad. I wonder if we have made this more complicated than it should be. That's our part in this failure of sorts. At a time when the church needs to be exerting greater effort into ensuring the future of faith by disciplining kids, some have become discouraged, given up, or have grown apathetic about their own futures and their children's futures. I check my heart. Yes, I believe radical love could have saved Nicholas Cruz. And I believe something else as well. Radical love could be the fearless future of faith, if we just remember how to love. Essential questions. Do you believe radical church love could be the solution to our country's epidemic of gun violence? Why or why not? List the ways the church could extend radical love to a community. To whom does the church need to extend radical love? What people groups do we need to love more radically as Jesus himself would? What groups think they are beyond Christian love? And finally, how can we examine our hearts, make adjustments, and change our culture's perception about the limits of Jesus' love? Think about these things.